Talk and begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, have a roll call, please.
Commissioner Wagner.
Here.
Commissioner Stacy.
Here.
Commissioner Zoller.
Here. Okay, I want to thank you all for coming to the hearing today on the Wolf Creek ditch petition process. I want to just begin with a little bit of history and the purpose of this meeting, kind of how we got here, where we're at today. Began in May of 2012, we received a petition to clean the main channel of Wolf Creek, which is allowed under Ohio Revised Code. Commissioners in annexation and ditch petition hearings take on just a little bit different role than what we normally take on. When we make a decision in our normal capacity, say if we're going to buy a sheriff cruiser or something, we look at how much money we have, we look at the condition of the cruiser and so on, and we make a decision based on what we feel is the right thing. In annexation hearings, and that decision is not appealable. If you don't like it, you can vote us out of office, but that's not appealable. A decision in an annexation hearing and a petition hearing, we actually become a court. So we take the facts of the case and apply them to the law. So it doesn't matter if we like the case, don't like the case, just like a judge, we apply them to the law. And this decision is appealable to the county police court. So it's a little bit different role for commissioners than what we're normally a part of. So after we received the petition, we set a date to view the ditch, we held the viewing, we set a first hearing date, and we held that first hearing in September of 2012. At that hearing, we received public comments, and we received the engineer's preliminary report dated September 17, 2012. Based on the engineer's preliminary report and his recommendation that we move forward, the Board of Commissioners in December then granted the petition. We granted the petition to clean the ditch. At that time, we also asked the engineer to prepare a full report as outlined in Ohio Revised Code. Based on the evidence in his full and more detailed report that we're going to receive today, we either affirm the decision that we granted or we set aside the decision that we granted. We were first going to receive that July 16th, and unfortunately it was not ready at that time, so we heard an update on July 16th, and we set today as the date to receive the full report, which we're going to do. The commissioners did receive a copy of it last week that we've looked over ourselves. We've not officially received the report until today. So we'll hear the report from the engineer, and perhaps Soil and Water, who assisted him in putting that together, will have something to say about it. Then we will take public comment. And then it was my hope that we would call this, I've been going under the premise that this would be the final hearing today, which that was my mistake. This is not the final hearing today. After further discussion with the prosecuting attorney, what we have to do, I was missing a step, what we have to do today, once we hear the report, hear the public comment, is we set a date for the final hearing. And it has to be between 25 and 90 days from today. We're looking at January the 30th. We'll do that later, but that's what we're looking at. Then between now and then, we have to send notices once again by certified mail to the affected landowners, notifying them of their particular assessment. So you will get a piece of paper in the mail that says my assessment is this, and the notice of that final hearing date and time and place. At the final hearing then, that should not be a long hearing, we will come and we will vote. Either we're going to set the motion aside to grant that we granted the petition, or we're going to affirm the petition at that time. So that's the order of things. And I hope that's fairly clear. We will start this meeting with Mr. Zimmerman giving us his final report.
Thanks, Jeff. I think probably the most convenient thing to do is I'll just go through the report that is being submitted to the commissioners as far as my final report goes. There are several questions that have been addressed to me by landowners and by the commissioners. That I might just go ahead and talk about those before I entertain questions. Some of those questions may be taken care of through what I'm going to talk. But of course, if there are any questions, please ask. This report is to the Seneca County Commissioners, dated November 26, 2013, submitted by myself, Seneca County Engineer. And then the relevant contact information. Subject is the petition for drainage works for the west branch of Wolf Creek. The object to remove obstructions from the main channel of the west branch of Wolf Creek, beginning at the Seneca-Hancock County line near Alveda and continuing to the Seneca-Sandusky County line near Bettsville. Report recommendations that the Seneca County engineer submits this report to the Seneca County Commissioners to either affirm or set aside the prior order to grant the prayer petition for ditch petition as instructed and instruct the engineer to proceed in accordance with ditch petition law. Everything we're doing is following ditch petition. There is a law under the Ohio Revised Code that we are following, trying to follow step by step for the ditch petition process. So what we are dealing with here are the different steps in the Ohio Revised Code. Background, the proposed Wolf Creek improvements have been initiated by petition of affected landowners in the Wolf Creek watershed in accordance with section 6131.04 of the Ohio Revised Code. Of particular concern are the areas directly adjacent to Wolf Creek and those lands draining via subsurface drainage. Furthermore, poor drainage caused by obstructions in the channel creates hazardous road conditions and increases road maintenance requirements. This causes concerns with regard to access for emergency vehicles, school buses, and local residents. Public safety is also concerned for vehicles crossing floodwaters, as are accidents involving deep waters adjacent to the road and accidents related to the deteriorating road conditions. On September 17, 2012, the Commissioners granted the prayer petition and ordered the Seneca County engineer to prepare a final report under ORC 6131. Proposed work is to remove existing log jams from the main channel, removal of sand and sediment bars that are affecting the normal flow of the channel, remove of dead and hanging trees that are imminent threats to the main channel, removal of mill dams, which is already in the works of being done, so that has been removed from the project, establishment of access points for maintenance. Work will be limited to the channel north. I have written in here because this was prior north of Township Road 112. We actually moved that location up to just south of State Route 18, where the tile from Hammer Heinzman subdivision enters the channel. Works south of there were determined that they were not necessary, as the channel is in relatively good condition south of the outlet for Hammer Heinzman subdivision, and is only in the main channel. The ditch historically south of there has provided an adequate outlet for local surface waters, and in particular has not been the topic of obstruction removal. Discussion. Section 6131 of the Ohio Revised Code describes the process and timelines that must be followed in response to the petition for drainage works. The following is a list of the steps that have been taken to date and further steps in the process. Thus far, and Jeff covered some of these, the petition was filed May 1st of 2012. A determination of the affected landowners, which is essentially a determination of the watershed. Notice regarding viewing and hearings were sent to the affected landowners. The viewing was held and an order to prepare the preliminary report was given. The preliminary report was filed and the prayer petition was granted. The ditch inventory was completed, and I have on here as well, nearly completed. It has been completed, but anytime you inventory a channel, it is literally a work in progress. We have had storms. We have had 2 major storm events since the majority of the inventory was done, and I can guarantee you that where leaning trees were, they are now down. Where trees were good, they are now leaning. Where log jams were, they have either moved or been removed by natural courses. So as far as that inventory goes, the Soil and Water Conservation District, in particular Joe and Jason, have worked diligently over the last several months, probably the last 5 months, 6 months, to inventory the mileage of Wolf Creek. And in doing so, which they've done a fantastic job of inventorying I'm kind of straying from my report, but as far as inventorying the log jams, the sand and sediment bars, and the leaning trees that are being proposed removed. During the process of doing so, from the beginning to the end, it's kind of like mowing a big yard. By the time you get done mowing your yard, it's time to go back to the beginning and start mowing again. We could inventory this entire channel and then begin at the north end and start inventorying it again. When we get done, it would be time to go to the north end and inventory it again. So we work under the best information we have, which is the information that was collected during the inventory that was conducted over the last several months. So if there are locations up here, and we can go over this map that show leaning trees, log jams, and sediment bars, those may not be there anymore. We don't know, but as we move through the process, in January, if the petition is affirmed and the order is given to go ahead to contract, then we will work with landowners in re-inventorying those ditch areas and ensuring that we are actually proposing to do work that still exists. That's kind of what needs to be done. The establishment of preliminary assessments and final assessments have been done. Well, final assessments as far as we know today from the engineer's estimate. The inventory has been evaluated and a cost estimate for each project location has been given. This report places the final engineer's report before the Senate County Commissioners as the hearing to affirm or deny the grant of petition during the preliminary hearing as required by section 6131.10 of the Ohio Revised Code. Environmental implications. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, Ohio EPA, and the Ohio Department of Natural Resources have been made aware of the project and will be consulted on the project from the onset and will be provided with a copy of the final engineer's report. The ODNR, which is required by law, have been sent all of the information for review. So I don't know that they have it yet. It was just sent at the end of last week. Depending upon when mail goes out of the mail room, it could still be sitting in the mail room. But anyhow, they have 30 days to respond with environmental concerns from the Ohio Department of Natural Resources. But according to law, we have to include the ODNR in the process. The Corps of Engineers and Ohio EPA are strictly for channel works where any permitting may be required for waterway permits, specifically dealing with the removal of sand and sediment bars if they are large enough to be considered channelizing, which we are not proposing doing with the ditch. But in removing a sand and silt bar, inevitably you are changing the shape of a water course. And by doing so, we just want to make sure that we are in compliance with all of the required permitting from the Corps of Engineers and with Ohio EPA. The concerns from ODNR relate primarily to the potential impact of significant wetlands, fish, aquatic, and wildlife habitat, and non-point pollution prevention, assessment, permit, and regulatory requirements with regard to any minor channel cleaning or reshaping will be provided herein, and that relates to, once again, the removal of sand and sediment bars. The strategic plan. The proposed works meet with several objectives. Implementation of the plan will be addressed in a 3 to 5 year systematic approach. Small log jams and tree removal will be addressed first, with larger, more significant jams being done from the top end of the project down. Sediment bars will be evaluated for effective channel flow, and all sediment bars will not be removed. In evaluating sand and sediment bars, by the nature of channels, by the nature of ditches, water flows slower at the inside of a curve of a ditch than it does on the outside. We can spend all the time, effort, and money we want to remove a sandbar from the inside of a curve, but we know that that sandbar is going to come back. We know that there are some deposition areas where slopes change and they get flatter. I have no interest in wasting your dollars. I guess these aren't tax dollars, they'd be your dollars in doing works that are not going to be long-term solutions to the problem. So each sandbar will be evaluated for its effectiveness. If it's in a location where that sandbar is going to just come back, then we will not be addressing those sandbars. This will allow, and the 3 to 5 year approach to the project that will allow for financial easing of the watershed landowners, as well as allow for necessary permitting. If any permitting is needed to be done from the Corps of Engineers or from Ohio EPA, As far as waterway permits go, those can sometimes take years. I don't think in this situation it would take years, probably months, but it's better to be safe in assuming that the process is going to take a lot longer when you're trying to work through the federal government than when you're not. Financial implications, the estimated cost of the drainage works, including the cost of the preliminary engineer's report and final engineer's report, was provided at $225,000 plus construction administration and maintenance estimates, which put the total at $272,500. The actual engineer's estimate, and once again, this is based on the inventory that was completed, best known to date. And the phases that we have are, for instance, the leaning tree phases. We're looking at 225 trees, inventory less than 12 inches, 35 trees between 12 and 24 inches, and 15 trees which are greater than 24 inches. I put less than, that needs to be changed. Less than 24 inches as far as the damages go. I also included mobilization and damages to landowners. As part of the process, any landowner that is being affected by the project does have the right at the final hearing to come forward and claim damages. So if, for instance, well, I don't even know what for instance there would be, but if you think that you are having damages, I'm not going to presume what somebody think would be damages and what they want. Then you have the right to come before the county commissioners and say, I believe that if you're going to come onto my property and take 6 trees off of my property that I'm being damaged and I will compensate it for that, then we do have money set aside for damages for landowners and also for mobilization. And the total for leaning trees estimated at $59,500. Log jam removal, mobilization is established at $20,000 and damages at $15,000. A little bit higher because of the need for different types of equipment, skidders that would need to come in to remove those log jams, possibly excavators. We are looking at a total of major log jams, and these are dictated into 4 different classifications. At the time of inventory again, 4 major log jams, 8 large, 18 medium, and 18 small log jams. Each of those were given an estimate of number of days to remove. For instance, the major log jams were given 3 days apiece, so you could spend up to 3 days removing that log jam down to a half a day, where we would anticipate small log jams that are close to each other, they could remove 2 of those in a single day. And then putting the cost at those at $1,400 per day, which is a cost of machinery and manpower, which is a pretty good estimate for what projects cost as far as large equipment goes and a two-person crew. Log jam phase is estimated at $112,000 for removal of log jams. Sediment bar removal, mobilization once again, and damages are built into the project. Estimate for the project is for the total sediment bar phase, and I backed out half of the work that is in here because those would be locations where we are simply not going to address those log jams that, I'm sorry, those sediment bars that are just going to come back at $47,600. The project work total, $219,100. Construction plans through the Soil and Water Conservation District, which includes all of the inventory estimates, time, materials, everything at $15,000, which was contracted between the County Commissioners and the Soil and Water Conservation District. Cost for construction administration set at an estimated $20,000. Maintenance, 10% of construction costs, estimated at $25,410. That maintenance, if the project is affirmed, would go into a fund. That fund would be maintained by the Soil and Water Conservation District through the Ditch Maintenance Department under the guise of the county engineer and the county commissioners for use for additional projects that need to be done to maintain the channel. That is required by law. The interest there is that if you were going to go to the expense, time, energy to clean the channel, then we want to make sure that it is perpetually maintained, so that 15 years from now we're not sitting here doing the same thing again. Contingencies were billed at 4%, which is $11,180. The total estimate for the project sitting right now is $290,690.40. Assessments. There's a lot of question as to how the assessments were determined. I wish the revised code told me how to do assessments. That would be much easier than just say do assessments, however you feel that they are best done. That is the guidance the revised code gives, is whatever you think's right is right. And I bring those before the commissioners, and if they say it's okay, it's okay. If they don't, then we go back to the drawing table. I guess because we are not looking at a channelizing project, I considered in the assessment schedule that we are looking at more of a flood control issue than we are looking at a channelizing project. And that being said, that those people who own land closest to the channel are going to receive the best benefit. The further away from the channel you are, the less flood opportunity you have, which means you have less benefit. And those that are even further away have have very little benefit, but they do contribute. In determining assessments, my job is to determine two primary things. First is the benefit, and then the contribution. So everybody contributes, so everybody pays, but everybody doesn't pay at the same rate because some people benefit more than others benefit. So this is a map that shows the location of the ditch, the buffers that were created. I established 3 zones. First is a zone that is 500 feet either side of the channel. Those lands were determined to have the biggest benefit for flood control and established at $25 per acre. The lands that were between 500 and 1,000 feet, which is the second zone, were established at $15 per acre, as they will receive the secondary benefit. And then all lands beyond 1,000 feet, my determination was that the actual benefit is very low, but they do contribute, and I set that at $3 per acre because of that benefit, or that cost benefit. Now there is a minimum per parcel that is established by revised code, which is $10. So there may have been some people that had 1 acre of ground in zone 3, their assessment came to $3, but it has to be set at a minimum. That is by revised code. So everybody would have gone through, and that would have been changed to $10 when you get your assessment. If you're wondering why it's, you only own 1 acre, but assessment's $10 instead of $3, that's why. And then on top of that, there is maintenance, which we had talked about, which is set at 10%. So it'd be $10 for the parcel plus $1 for maintenance, and the total assessment would be set at $11 then for that 1 acre, for instance, in zone 3. And that should be true for 1, 2, or 3 acre parcels, up to 3 1/3 acre parcels in zone 3. Supporting documentation, obstruction, location, work plan, and the watershed. I have submitted the information that I think it's on the website. Is that correct?
Yes.
I encourage everybody that's here today, anybody that may be looking at the minutes or reading the minutes, to go to the website. I believe strongly in public involvement. I believe strongly in public comment. Whether I agree or disagree is irrelevant to what you feel, what I'm doing, what the commissioner is doing. As far as affirmation or denying this directly affects you. It doesn't directly affect me. I don't own lands in the watershed. So I understand that what I'm proposing doing is spending your money. And I don't take that responsibility lightly. And I know that the 3 commissioners don't take that responsibility lightly either. So if you have something to say, whether it's a positive comment or a negative comment, I think as long as it is a productive comment, then it should be heard. So as far as that goes, that is a rendition of the final report that was submitted that is on the website for anyone to review. I will tell you that as far as developing these reports, plans and specifications, this is the first ditch petition of this magnitude, other than one very tiny little project we worked together on a few years ago to put a little tile in to fix some houses that were flooding. This is the first ditch petition in Seneca County since before I was alive. That's how new we are to this process. So as far as making sure that we do everything by the law, we are trying and working through the prosecutor's office to ensure that we are following the letter of the law. As far as determining assessment schedules and determining assessment methods, there are counties that do this that have drainage departments that do nothing but this. This is their job. We are doing what we feel is best for the landowners, is best for the community, best for the public interest. But if there are comments or concerns, once again, we need to hear those. I have been in contact with all landowners that own land adjacent to the ditch, either by personal phone call or by letter. My interest, I guess, is I sent letters out to everybody that has work that is being proposed on their properties. And my interest is this, and it would of course be up to the commissioners whether or not they approve this, but I would like to get as much work done by property owners that own the property outside the contract, outside the petition, outside public involvement, that if you've got trees that need to come down, if you have log jams in your ditch, let's get those done. Let's try to work through the process of, if you have lands and you have water and you have a log jam, get a tractor, get a log chain, some chainsaws and some buddies, and get them pulled up on the bank. Because it's going to save you a ton of money, and it's going to save the project a ton of money, and that's less people that are going to have to be on your property, which I know there's probably not a whole lot of people that even welcome the idea of somebody or a contractor with large equipment going onto their properties, which would happen as far as this project goes, if it were affirmed. I have sent letters out primarily for the leaning trees at this point. I have got a very favorable response from almost all landowners that are able to take care of those trees, that they would be willing to take care of those trees on their own. And what we're looking at is giving them 2 years, basically by the end of 2015 and that could even be extended a little bit, to address those trees on their own. And what that does is allows people time to get in there, cut those trees down, drag them up to the bank, use them for firewood, call buddies that need firewood, whatever may need to happen, just get them out of the channel. And my proposal then is that any monies that were, and this is a little different than what I had said in the letter, but I've done a lot of thinking after talking with a lot of landowners about this, is that if you have an assessment of $1,000 and you have 5 trees that are estimated at $150 a piece, and that's $750 worth of work that we're not going to have to do under contract, then that could come directly off of your assessment. That way it's a benefit to the landowner, it's a benefit to the group, it's a benefit to the community, it's a benefit to the entire watershed. So that is what we are working with the landowners. Same thing with log jams. Every log jam has a cost associated with it, every tree has a cost associated with it, and if we can do those things outside the contract, outside the petition, outside having to deal with this in a public forum, the better. I am more than, for any landowners that do own lands, I am more than willing to meet out in the field. If this project is affirmed in January, then I would want to meet every property owner to go over what work would be done in the field anyhow. I think landowners are owed that responsibility. There were questions as to how the acreage was determined. Acreage was determined by the auditor's the auditor's records, tax records, and our geographical information system. neither of which are a perfect system. There are errors in the process. We did the best we can to make sure that parcel acreages is correct. Parcel acreages are correct based on auditor's records, based on tax map records, based on, but every deed was not researched. And even if every deed were researched, there are several parcels that are just the northwest quarter, the northwest quarter, the northwest quarter. 40 acres plus or minus. So what I encourage landowners to do is when you get your assessments, when you get your information in the mail, to review those. If there are concerns you have, for instance, if you have 21.9 acres, but for some reason I have 219 acres because a decimal point got put in the wrong place, then those things certainly will be addressed and certainly will be corrected. So, you know, every landowner, you know, review your information, make sure that information is as accurate as it can be. The buffers, 1,000-foot and 500-foot buffers, were established from the approximate center line of the channel. Now, where is the center line of Wolf Creek? Yeah, depends. It really depends. It is based on my best estimate on where the center line of the channel was. There are places in Sandusky County where and that Wolf Creek is wider than the Sandusky River. Okay, and then it narrows back down into a 100-foot channel. You know, we went up just 2 weeks ago and looked at that. Hundreds of feet wide. The establishment of where the center line is my best estimate. So that's where that came from. I wish I had a more scientific method of determining the center line, but the center line is the best we can do for that. Factors to be considered, the revised code gives the county commissioners eight factors to consider for determining whether or not the project should be affirmed or be set aside. And that's where Jeff was talking earlier about the county commissioners acting as a court. They work through these conditions. If these conditions are met, then in their opinions, as judges of this court, then they vote to affirm. If they, in their opinion, these things are not met, then they vote to set aside. And so I guess that's where, and I want to go through these factors and just talk about what the factors are a little bit, because any questions, not that any question can't be asked, but any question that will fully be used for the commissioners to determine a yes or no vote as to affirm or to set this aside have to deal with one of these 8 things. Anything outside of these 8 points is not admissible to court. It's, being said. You can say it all you want, but if it's not relevant to these things, then these are the things the commissioners use to determine yes or no. So the first is the cost of location and construction of the project. That has to be evaluated. The compensation for lands to be taken. There are many ditch petitions or petition projects where specifically working in channelizing a stream or moving a stream where we may be coming through somebody's property and say we need to take ground from you, physically take ground to build a new channel. That is primarily what that is talking about, compensation for that. So if, for instance, land's going for $8,000 to $10,000 an acre and my proposed compensation is $500 per acre, then that, of course, would be, something for them to look at and say, that's not realistic. And those are the things you would come to the final hearing and say, you're proposing taking some land, but you are not compensating me enough. That's why damages were built into all of the those individual cost assessments. But once again, we are not proposing channelizing this ditch. We are not changing the course of the ditch at all. The third thing is the effect on lands along and in the vicinity of the route. That is how the assessments were determined. is the route as far as the lands along and in the vicinity, and the effect of those lands, both how they contribute and how they benefit. The fourth is the effect on lands below the lower terminus that may be caused. There are landowners who believe that they will be flooded more at the lower end of the channel after a petition, if it were affirmed, were completed. That testimony would, of course, be listened to by the county commissioners, and if they believed that first of it were true, and second, if it were bad enough to say that we can't do the project because we don't want to hurt people downstream, then that's another factor that they would be deciding on. The third is the sufficiency of the outlet. A lot of debate may go back and forth as to the sufficiency of the outlet. We are not, however, proposing channelizing this ditch for putting a large tile in, for adding any additional waters that never came here before. So the sufficiency of the outlet post as opposed to pre, I think would need to be looked at, not just overall sufficiency of the outlet. There are times when the Sandusky River rises and water backs up Wolf Creek. If you look at that as being a sufficiency for an outlet, this project would need to go through the Sandusky Bay, lower Lake Erie, into the Great Lakes, and all the way up through Sault Ste. Marie, and maybe then we can get some relief. But of course, that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about whether or not we are adding additional flows to the channel, increasing the concentration of those flows, to say that we are going to be having an outlet that will not take it. When the Sandusky River's up, I can tell you right now, there's no water going to flow. That's irrelevant to this project. That's an act of God, where that is not what we're looking at for our outlet. The benefit to the public welfare, as far as the removal of waters that affect our roads, culverts, tiles, and bridges. Benefit to lands, public corporations in the state of Ohio. The benefits to public corporations in the state of Ohio are low, past the effects of road and bridge safety, but the benefit to lands as far as increased productivity and flood control. And then the catch-all, H, is any other proper matter. So any other thing that, if it's not addressing these things, you think, it may not be addressing those, but this is important to me, and I think it's a proper matter, then those things would come before the Board of County Commissioners as well. Did I miss anything? You guys think about it?
I'm sorry.
No, good.
Why don't we go next then if the board has any questions? Does the board have any questions of the engineer regarding his plan report?
Mark, the assessment, okay, you've got $25, $15, and $10 per acre. That's the original assessment, and then the long-term maintenance would be 10% of that, so it's either $2.50, $1.50, or $1 would be the assessment per acre that's ongoing year after year, correct?
No, not, yes and no. The way assessments work for maintenance is that in order to establish the maintenance fund, it is established at 10%. That's a number it can go up to, is 15 the max, or is 20 the max now? I think 15% is the maximum, 5% is the lowest, set it right in the middle of 10%. So the proposal is to set it at 10%, and we would collect, at the beginning of the project, some $25,000 plus or minus. Now, that $25,000 is held in a fund. It is your money held in a fund for you as landowners in the watershed for work to be done on the project. If next year the ditch maintenance department through soil and water does $1,000 worth of work on the channel, then that $1,000 would be assessed back to the landowners on your taxes. Not the full $25,000, but at the end of every year, and it may be a couple of years, it goes down, then we wait to collect, so we're not collecting pennies from people, is that we always want to maintain that 10%, plus or minus, a little bit. So that 10%, so if we use on a big, storm, whatever happens, and we've got 3 log jams and they cost $5,000 to remove, then that next year $5,000 would be assessed back to the landowners. And it may be just a little bit of work for the inspection. Soil and Water would need to do an inspection annually on the channel. There's, of course, their time, equipment, materials, that would be assessed back to the landowners. But that assessment is not done every year. It is only done as needed.
Once the 10% is collected, and then there's no further assessments until that's depleted or reduced down, and then you would just
Fill it back up.
come back to the assessments to fill it back. So
That's
it's
correct.
not necessarily ongoing year after year after year. They come and go.
Right, and the proposal for the project, since we are looking at addressing all of these needs, is that we won't have that big burden every year. That at the end of the project, it will be small maintenance items that happen on the channel rather than large projects.
Other questions from the board? I had a couple here. So to be clear, in your opinion, you're recommending that we proceed with this project?
In my opinion, the benefit outweighs the cost of the project.
Okay. And in considering these, as our expert on this issue by law, you're saying these 8 factors have satisfactorily been met?
I believe they have.
Okay,
Yes.
okay. And that's all the questions I have. So we'll let you ask questions now. We won't do public comment yet, so this is just a question. If you have a question, yes.
Question, I'm representing several neighbors.
Let me back up. You might want to say your name for the record, too.
I'm Fred Zerder. On your map there, that's showing where you're going to do this work. Okay, my question is if you're far, far away from that, but live right next to the northwest corner of the northwest corner of the northwest branch, blah, 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 that's into that 1,000, or the lowest.
The lowest, zone 3.
Okay, because that's one of the things. The other question they asked, they said, well, we own 1.72 acres. That's what the assessment is, or are they rounding off to the closest acre? or-
Any assessment, for instance, that 1.7 acres, the assessment would be shown to be close to about $5.25. But the minimum required by law is $10. So if they owned that and they were in zone 3 in the blue area, they weren't adjacent to the channel or adjacent to the channel down past where Hammer Heisman comes in, then the minimum is $10. So if their actual assessment would come to be about $6, but I can't just charge $6 according to law. It's $10, so they would be charged $10 plus $1 maintenance. So their assessment when it comes would say $11 on it if they're in zone 3.
Other questions? Yes, ma'am.
You referred to a website we should refer to. Is that the engineer's website or the commissioner's website?
County commissioners.
What is
What's
the,
the URL for it?
I'm sorry.
what
Oh,
It's www.seneca-county.com.
Okay, thank you.
yeah, I'm not high tech enough to have a website. Maybe someday.
other questions before we do the comment? Yes, Kevin.
Yeah, Kevin Williams in Tiffin. Mark, you mentioned a couple things. I wanted to request clarification. You mentioned a buffer zone, 500 feet and 1,000 feet. Can you explain what that is and how that, what a buffer zone, what the 500 feet signifies?
And with 1,000, that's what's on the map, and that is what was determined for landowners and lands that are with, because of the flood control issue, that lands that are closer to the channel are gonna receive more benefit than lands that aren't. And so that is the method that I chose for assessment from the channel, 500 foot and then 1,000 foot.
So 500 feet is zone 1
Correct,
and 1,000 feet is zone 2.
that's correct. 500 to 1,000 is zone 2, correct.
Anything beyond 1,000 feet is zone 3.
That is correct.
What about the access road that the heavy equipment will be using? At a previous hearing, I think 25 feet was mentioned.
a road will not be built. For instance, the proposal is not to go along the entire bank of Wolf Creek and create a clear zone. That is not of any interest. If we were channelizing the stream where we were looking, for instance, at a traditional ditch where soil and water would spray, where they would be maintaining outlet tile, where they would be doing vegetation control, rock channel protection, you need access to the channel. We are not proposing any of those things. If there are outlet tile problems, those are not part of this ditch petition. If there are issues with banks sloughing off, and that is not being proposed in this project. So any access roads or maintenance lanes that need to be maintained, for instance, that can't be accessed directly off of a highway, there is compensation that is built in. And that compensation could be long-term, so that during the inventory, if there were a log jam that formed on your property, say you own the ditch, that prudence would say that we wait until crops are off, and then after crops are off, somebody's hired to go out and do that. Now, if there's damage created, or if we have to get in there for some reason that we take crops down, then of course you would be compensated for those through the maintenance program.
So there won't be a permanent access.
But not more than what is needed for them to do their maintenance. Right.
Another question, you stated that landowners downstream can submit a claim for compensation. Would that include the downstream landowners in Sandusky County?
I don't know that the law has any limits on that. I think somebody on the Sandusky Bay could claim damages.
And those claims at this point are unknown and unknowable. Correct?
To me, yeah. I mean, that's what landowners are for. If they believe that they have a claim, then they should bring it before the commissioners.
I think more what you're talking about with damages, and correct me if I'm wrong, is if you cut down a big walnut tree on my property that was worth $1,000
Right.
or something like that.
I think that also Mark discussed the potential for flood damage to downstream landowners. So if landowners in Dusty County could potentially then submit a claim that this project caused additional flooding such as scour erosion, topsoil loss, and other damages. So that could then be allowed, or that is under law.
As far as I know, there are no limits to what somebody can claim. I mean, you can claim anything. You can claim anything.
Who pays for if these lawsuits occur, who pays for the litigation? Would it be taken out of this assessment, or would there be more assessments to cover it? Where would payment for it come from?
Well, it depends on, I think, where, and I'm not a lawyer, so I'm using my best guess here. For what I know in the past is that the county prosecutor represents me and represents the county commissioners. And if it is within the purview of the county prosecutor to handle that case for time, primarily time, that they can handle it within their own staff, then it could be absorbed through the county. However, if a special prosecutor needed to be hired, which in projects of this magnitude could very well be the case, then those costs for a special prosecutor would have to be borne by someone, and someone is the group.
The landowner then,
That is correct.
this fee that you're collecting.
Right.
I see.
And I think it's important too to understand that we might be talking about two different time periods, because the initial time period when landowners can bring a claim against the project to the commissioners at the final hearing is different than if the project is affirmed and then years down the road you believe that you're having damages and those need to be collected. There's a difference there. So and I'm going to suppose, and only suppose, and let's say that the county commissioners deny the petition. They set it aside. But there's a landowner that says you made the wrong decision. I'm going to appeal that to court. I'm going to appeal that to the common pleas judge. Then that lawsuit would be between the landowner and the county, and the county would either have to have the prosecutor do that or hire a special prosecutor. In the end, though, that would all go back to the petitioners. And if 5 years from now, though, am I making sense or am I just rambling? I mean, honestly, I don't know that much about the law. I just want to try to address your question the best I can. That if you believe you have a claim years from now, if they affirm it, and you believe you have a claim, then we would work directly through the Soil and Water Conservation District, the prosecutor's office, my office, to resolve that claim. And I guess what I would hope completely outside the courts. But if it came to it, once again, the prosecutor's office does represent. So, Kevin?
Just two more questions, Mark. The Ohio Revised Code requires that the benefits exceed the cost in order for this project to move forward. And your office has estimated the cost at greater than $290,000. What is your dollar estimate of benefits?
I do not have a greater than cost.
How did you arrive at that?
Based on the long-term productivity of the lands.
You have figures, have you done a calculation, or is that simply a
It's my belief,
assumption,
yes. It's not an assumption, it is the costs do outweigh the benefits.
in your opinion?
Or I'm sorry, the benefits do outweigh the costs, in my opinion, that is correct.
But we don't have any dollar figures or any methodology of how that
No,
opinion was arrived at.
nothing in the report.
My final question, Mark. You stated in your presentation that when the Sandusky River floods, that no benefit will be derived from this project.
No, I never
During
said
the period
that.
of-
No, that is completely not what I said.
Okay, that's my note, but
No, completely not what I said. I mean, I can go back in that record, but and I say no benefits. I said there's little that can be done as far as drainage goes, and when the Sandusky River comes up, that's not an opinion, that's fact.
so when the Sandusky River is in flood stage, that the conditions on the ground,
Are the same as they are today.
there'll be no difference in the conditions, the flooded fields,
Right, to be no worse, so there'd be no harm.
be no difference.
No harm, right.
Thank you.
Okay, other questions? Yes, sir. Yes. State your
David
name.
Fry. A couple questions for you, Mark. The first question I have for you is, you started talking about earlier about when the Army Corps of Engineers and the EPA may be involved. And during your statements, you was talking about, depending on the size of the sediment bar, that may have to involve them. Can you tell me what the size?
What that size is?
Yes,
Uh,
or just a ballpark idea of what you're talking about.
I would say it is a ballpark size is anything that is affecting greater than half of the overall dimension of the channel. So if the channel were 100 feet wide on either end of the sandbar and the sandbar exceeded beyond half of that, I would say that the Corps could consider that to be channelizing. If the project were affirmed, I would just work directly with the Corps and let them tell me what they consider to be something that they want to look at. More than likely, what would happen is, as we do landowner evaluations, the Soil and Water does have pictures, I think, of most everything that we will either invite the Corps, and if they're able to come, then we'll schedule those meetings best we can, all on the same day, and just have them here to look at them, and they can say, yeah, we probably ought to do some permitting on that one. No, we don't need to do any permitting on that one. or by submitting pictures. Or they may just say, I want to see every single thing, or they may want to say, I don't want to see anything. That strictly be up to them.
And then my other question to go with it, of course, we talked in the last meeting, you even mentioned in the initial meeting last September that we're not going to be able to address the 100-year rain events with this project. What was the time, what kind of a rain event were you going to be able to address with this project?
Well, I think that the project can address all rain events. What we can't address is those rain events that require when the river comes up. So I guess in what my feelings are, or my and not my feelings, I guess what I am proposing is that we have a period of time, 3 to 4 days, maybe 2 days, depends on where the rain event is, from the time of concentration of when Wolf Creek comes up to when the Sandusky River comes up. My interest is to get as much water passed to the Sandusky River in that 3 to 4 day period as we possibly can before the river comes up. Now, that helps for all storm events. It may be to the point, though, where we have a 100-year storm event in Timok, and we have no rain here, and the river comes up and backs up Wolf Creek, and there is absolutely no benefit gained by the project. And then we may have a time when we have 5-year storm events where the river never really comes up, but we're allowed free passage of water through Wolf Creek, and those help every single time. It is not a specific rain event that we can or can't plan for. Improving the channel by removing log jams, which is the primary benefit of what we're doing, and some sediment bars will help for all storm events. It will not solve the overall flooding problem for all storm events, but it will help get rid of the water for all storm events.
In the last 2 years or 3 years since you've been involved with this project, outside of the 100-year rain events, is there any other storm events where you thought there was flooding created?
I don't know. I would say not to pass that on. Not without. I don't know. I don't study the watershed.
Okay.
I would imagine that large storm events flood more than. My interest, though, like I said, is to get as much water passed through the watershed as we possibly can to limit that amount of flooding. But to address, I don't know if the interest is that storm events today are not like storm events were 15, 20 years ago. And I fully acknowledge that and agree that we don't get little rains anymore. It's either rains or it doesn't rain. Either floods or it doesn't flood. Will this help every one of those? To some level, yeah. Will it stop flooding at every single one of these? Absolutely not. It will not.
Thank you.
Okay, you got a question, sir?
Yes, I'm Bill Reinhardt. The original petition, I understand, was from Hancock County to Sandusky County, but you're only going from 112 to Sandusky County. What would stop a landowner south of 112 from saying, hey, I've got a log jam I need to remove? Because the original petition was from...
Yeah, it was just determined from the course of the project that the petition can exist that far, but no work is being proposed beyond
About
that.
someone complaining, hey, I've got a log jam down here by Alveda, would we have to take it out?
No. If the petition is affirmed, then the work limits are from where we are proposing, from just south, then the work limits are established here. If somebody later wanted to say, hey, we want to extend, because what that would do is extend the zones for assessments, then that would need to be relooked at and redone.
But the original petition stated Hancock to
Right.
Sandusky.
And that is still, and those works still exist there. We're just not doing any work in those areas. The petitions can exist there, but no work is being proposed.
Other questions before we go to public comment? All right, I do want to thank the engineer because this added a heck of a lot of workload to his normal duties. He's used to doing bridges and roads, and we don't do, as he said, a lot of petitions in Seneca County. So we're finished with the questions. Now we're just going to take public comment. Again, keep in mind public comment, we have to decide based on Ohio law, and he mentioned the 8 things that affect that. Our normal policy on public comment at our meeting is 3 minutes. If you go over that, nobody's gonna bang the gavel and say, shut up, but, try and keep it a reasonable amount of time. Be polite, we're all adults here, this divides people, try and be polite in your comments, and state your name for the record. Who would like to go first? Okay, we may not have any public comments, you're all very polite. Pat?
Pat Sugar, landowner on Wolf Creek. The major thing was to get the water flowing through Wolf Creek, and you're never gonna stop all the flooding on Wolf Creek. And what they're saying is that maybe the flooding is going fast downstream, but every bridge that you have on the way down is a detention center, which is going to hold water and only let so much water go through anyway. So I just wanted to say that there is a detention center there, and the flooding ain't gonna let the water go immediately through. It's gonna stop at every bridge to let it go. So that will be the detention center to let the water go naturally through, to keep the flow going. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? All right. Go ahead. Okay, we do have some.
Part of what I wanted to say, my name's Ron Willoughby, and part of what I wanted to say is this. We had a history in Sandusky County at one time and benefited Seneca County quite a bit. And our commissioners in Sandusky County didn't handle this anymore, and neither did the city of Fremont. They used to open up the dam. I remember when people fished in that Sandusky River down there, they'd open up that dam and they had to get out of the river because the water would come up so fast. They used to open up that dam, and then they got to the place that they didn't handle that dam anymore and they couldn't open it up. And one of your problems is that dam. But there's a lot of people in Fremont that are worried that that dam is taken out, they're going to be flooded. And, but they used to take care of that in Fremont. I don't know what happened to them. They quit doing it. And that helps Seneca County out a lot. That helps Pat out where he lives and everybody else. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Hey,
Oh, okay, whoever.
Go ahead. Kevin Williams, my final comment. The petitioners have failed to establish by any form of methodology or factual basis that the benefits, which are unknown and undetermined, exceed the cost, estimated to be greater than $290,000. As such, the Ohio Revised Code, the law in the state of Ohio, requires that the petition be denied. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
I guess my question is, if he's worried about log jams and sandbars, why don't they just work with the landowners taking them out? Why do you gotta have everybody in the watershed involved?
We are following the law of the petition process. Once the petition is filed, you have to go through this process and.
You know what I'm saying? It'd be a lot easier to deal with 20 people and thousands or whatever.
It's obvious that not everybody has taken care of their land, and that's what started the petition. Like, you may have taken care of your land, but your neighbor hasn't. And so that's what started the petition, is everybody's gonna take care of it.
We wouldn't all be paying for policemen if everybody was honest. That's more or less what it is.
Yes, sir.
James Burns, Loudon Township. Lived in township for 70-some years. This project probably should have been attended to 30, 40 years ago. Back then, farmers took care of their ditches and stuff. But now, you get people that move from the town and they drain water into the ditches and they don't pay any attention to the problems that with brush build up. So I think this, for the bargain, we're getting a bargain for the kind of money that you guys are talking about doing this project that should have been done 40 years ago. It's now, maybe it's time for to step up and do it and take care of it. Because another 30 years on down the road, if you people don't do anything, now I'm sure you got somebody that's gonna be coming onto the ground and houses. Now, you gotta have an outlet. And this outlet was not taken care of, and it's time that it better be doing it now.
Thank you. Other comments?
Jeff, I'd like to just make a comment. Kevin, to you back there, I understand what you're talking about is the assessment may not have been taken for the value of the project, is the cost benefit. And I think that could be something that could very easily be done. We look at the landowners and we look at the loss of yield in their crops because of flooding and so forth, and that could be something that could be fairly easy assessed. And then look at that over a period of years. And I think that the assumption that Engineer Mark Zimmerman's making is probably a correct assumption, that the advantages are, even though we don't have a dollar figure on it, just look at the loss of crops, and we all know how much there is an acreage of corn and beans and so forth, that could easily be the assumption be made there.
And some of it's measurable, some of it's not, because we had a Jackson Township trustee testify once that the roads flooded because of Wolf Creek, and that's an unmeasurable amount. So yeah, some could be measured, some could not.
So there may not be a quantitative figure on that, but I would have to agree with the assumption, based on the cost of crops, that and the yearly loss of that it would be much greater than $290,000.
Okay, Jerome.
Jerome Miller, Liberty Township. I wasn't going to say anything, but I was going to continue. You know, Pat brought up the fact that that railroad bridge at Bettsville is a retention spot. And it is, of course, but I have never seen no water there. If these trees upstream are stopping all this water, there wouldn't be water at the bridge. But the bridge has all this water held back, which means now you're taking log jams off. There's nothing upstream holding that water, but that bridge still is. Don't you think there's going to be more water now backed up behind that bridge if now those logs are stopping that are higher upstream?
Thank you. Did I see another hand?
Hey, Mark, are you pretty confident that the Sandusky County can handle this if the river ain't up?
I am confident, I assume I'm confident that it is going to not handle it any worse than it handles it today.
I just want to get it up there, is it going to stop?
We are not proposing adding one additional drop of water to Sandusky County that doesn't already go there.
Just get there quicker.
Yes. Not necessarily through more velocity, but through a longer duration of time.
That's my question. Will they be able to handle it if it gets there quicker?
Well, my point is that if it gets there quicker, there'll be less water. Because instead of waiting for the third day when all the water's trying to get there, because it's all been backed up behind these log jams, it's going to be there in the first day, the second day, the third day, and the fourth day. And all that water will be gone before the river comes up and before they have to handle it. Now, is that in every storm event? Absolutely not. That addresses Mr. Fry's comment. And I know Mr. Pope has similar concerns. It will not address every, and I never would tell you that it will. But during the majority of storm events, I believe it will, yes.
We had another fellow back there, want to comment?
Actually, Ed Goshi, I have land on Wolf Creek and the river, and I can tell you when the water comes up, if it's not gone within 24 hours, you've lost your crop anyway. So I don't understand where this is actually going to help us at all, because I watched Wolf Creek, right where it comes in at 112, and we've had maybe 4 or 5 inches of rain, which you say, well, we're getting all this runoff. And I look at that creek, and it's not coming over the bridge or not over the tile in the ditch or anything yet. But then I go down on 18 where these houses are coming in the ditches are running full. And that part is true, that the most of the water is coming from residents because they don't have, the fields absorb water. Houses do not. So that all runs off. It runs off down the road, it runs off down their yards, down in their creeks or streams or whatever. So we're getting charged unjustly here as landowners, I think,
for what's going in, because our ground actually stops the water. In other words, it absorbs. And there's nothing you're gonna do about when a creek comes up, or a river, and I'm right on the river, and all of you have probably seen my loss this year. There ain't a damn thing I can do about it, and nothing you can do about it. I mean, you could sit there and clean the river out. Now, maybe the dam getting taken out down at Fremont might help. I don't know. But I can tell you that once the water goes over for 24 hours, you've lost your crop anyway. It's gone, whether it's corn or beans. So I don't see really where the benefit is, other than a lot more on the taxpayer or on the landowner, especially the ones right beside Wolf Creek. That 500 feet to the 1,000 feet is going to get charged, I think, very unjustly, and then a continuing, on top of that, maintenance charge. Now, I've never seen a tax go away in my lifetime. I mean, I hate to argue that point, but eventually somebody will say, well, there's something down here. Well, we don't have enough money, so we have to tax the guys again. So whoever, whether it's me that owns that property or the next guy down the road, I don't think that's a fair to go ahead and, keep taxing, especially the guy right beside the creek. And that's not really where all the water's coming from. I can understand the log jam. I can understand it one time. That's all.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Ron Willoughby. I don't know what he's talking about here, but let me tell you this. Carl Murray, living over there by Old Fort, had a big field of corn that many, many acres wiped out this year. That wasn't from Wolf Creek. That was from the Sandusky River. Overmeyers, down by the Wolf Creek there, Sandusky River, they got flooded out this year. That was not from Wolf Creek. That was from the Sandusky River. Overmeyers down there got wiped out too. And a bunch of them got wiped out. And all along the Sandusky River, as you get down toward Old Fort, you will find a lot of fields wiped out. It wasn't water caused by Seneca County. It wasn't water caused by Sandusky County. It was coming from someplace else. And all I got to do is get in the car and drive up toward Tiamat City and look around. I can see it happening up there. Clear from Tiamat Creek to McCutcheon. Places that I used to remember, and my dad hunted and so forth. Places that raise good crops. They don't even plant them anymore, some of them. And that water came clear across from the Sandusky River, clear over to McCutcheonville. As you go out of McCutcheonville and the creek, there you're heading south. That was all flooded. I remember. We got other problems, people. It isn't just Sandusky County, and it isn't just Seneca County. It's upstream too. I don't think it is. And it isn't all farmers doing it. A whole bunch of people doing it.
That was the last point. It's not all farmers doing it.
Right.
Okay, thank you. All right, what we need to do now is we need to set the final hearing date, and you have a resolution for us?
I do. I have a resolution setting time, date, and place for the Seneca County Board of Commissioners to hold the final hearing for the proposed obstruction and removal for Wolf Creek. This will be scheduled at January 30th, 2014 at 10 a.m. at the Public Safety Building.
Okay, is there a motion?
I make a motion that we accept that proposal.
I'll second that.
Any discussion on that date? So it'll be right here, 10 o'clock on that date. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Zoller,
Yes.
Commissioner Stacy,
Yes.
Commissioner Wegner.
Yes. Is there anything else the staff knows that we need to do to comply with the law here? Is there a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Okay, we are adjourned. It's 11:15. Thank you all for coming.